Okay.
Okay.
Hey everybody. Again, I'm Mr. McConnell, and we're going to be learning about primary versus secondary sources today. So you all should have a decent idea from your prior classes about what primary and secondary sources are. Anyone want to give me an example of a primary source? Yes.
A journal.
Why is a journal an example?
Personal. Coming straight from the person.
Personal, coming straight from the person.
Diary.
All right, the diary, good too. So like if we go back to what we learned yesterday on our little articles that we went through, so that the burning of the Quran in Sweden on that day, that tweet was a primary source, right? Because that was the first-hand account, day of, straightforward. And then the rest of them would have been secondary sources because, you know, obviously other people had taken from that and written more on and gathered and used that information to make something else, right?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir. Good. Again, these are your standards that we're going to be covering over this lesson. Your library ones, determining the need to gather information. So like, why would you need to use a primary source versus a secondary source? Again, they have different purposes. 2, making critical choices about information sources to use. That kind of goes back to the other one. It helps you decide which one you would need. So like, if you were doing, say, a book review on Fahrenheit 451, you would use that book as a primary source. And then, say you're doing a report on censorship, you would have somebody else's articles that they've written on that and use that as a secondary versus your primary. 3rd, performing an ongoing analysis of the reflection on the quality, usefulness, and accuracy of the curated sources. So that kind of goes back to what we learned yesterday. As time goes on, you're more likely to see accuracy with information because it's been baked, as your term that you like to use.
Yeah.
You know, kind of worked on it a little bit more. And then for your English standard, evaluate how reasoning and evidence affects the argument on specific claims to a text. So again, like how we learned before, what is the purpose of these sources of information, and how does it affect the arguments that you're trying to use them for to make? Yes?
Did you make your slide card?
I did make these slides myself.
Phenomenal job.
A long time.
Looks great.
On to the next one. So, yep, we're good. We think we got
Yeah, we're
what's
good.
going on.
Yeah!
Thank you. Thumbs up, proud. Okay, so the first one's primary sources. Primary sources are original records of the political, economic, artistic, scientific, social, and intellectual thoughts and achievements of specific historical periods. I know that's a lot to read, but again, it covers a lot of genres. It's produced by people who participated in and witnessed the past. Primary sources offer a variety of points of view and perspectives of events, issues, and people and places. The important thing to remember is that primary sources were used or created by someone with first-hand experiences or events. So like here, this picture, I believe, is probably World War II. And what they used to do back then was they would send journalists over there to document that kind of stuff. You know, they needed to show the people in, say, America, because obviously we weren't that involved physically because it was happening in Europe. But we need to see what's going on. Same thing with like the Great Depression with like Dorothea Lange's pictures. Like, you all ever see that picture of like Migrant Mother? It's like the kind of the haggard woman with like the 2 kids on it. You probably saw it in like a history book. But they used that to like as a primary resource for to witness what was happening during the Great Depression. Again, like I said before, that tweet from the lesson yesterday, again, another example of primary sources. You kind of have a good idea of what I said, what that is?
Sir.
Yes, thumbs up, thank you very much.
We're good.
Angel, thumbs up, thank you.
Thumbs up.
Secondary sources. Secondary sources are documents, texts, images, and objects about an event created by someone who typically reference the primary source for their information. These are works that synthesize, summarize, and/or interpret primary sources. So like textbooks, encyclopedias, things like that, that have taken primary sources, added them together, studied them, and analyzes them to kind of like further their information on it. So all those other sources from yesterday, the newspaper articles, the scholarly journals, the book, those are all secondary sources because they took that primary information and then worked it together and made something new from it. Right?
So
Can you all think of another example of a secondary source? Come on.
I'm not really good at this kind of stuff.
It's all right, no matter. I'm not good at it either. Give me Try it. What is something that someone has had to take like a primary source to make them?
Documentaries?
Wouldn't an encyclopedia
Right.
be one?
A document. What?
An encyclopedia?
An encyclopedia is a good example because it's just a combination of a whole bunch of information put into one to help you understand other stuff. Thumbs up if that was kind of a good idea.
Yeah.
Yes. Thank you. Okay. Moving on to examples, which we've kind of done beforehand, making sure we understood. But some primary examples of primary resources. Diaries, interviews, speeches, photographs, academic research, often printed scholarly articles, fiction, novels, poetry, short stories, and empirical articles. And just because that is a little bit of a word that I struggled with learning, an empirical article is a primary source. It is actual observations and experiences or experiments of, say, the first-time studies. You know, so it's like first hands-on, so it's primary. And then you have over on secondary, encyclopedias, histories, reviews, textbooks, magazine articles, biographies, meta-analysis, which, do you all know what a meta-analysis is?
No.
I didn't really know what it was either, so I also wrote that down. So a meta-analysis is data from a number of independent studies on the same subject in order to understand overall trends. So again, like encyclopedias and textbooks, it is information that is taken from a primary source, say like an empirical article or a speech or diary, and then they have worked on it and studied, and they've made something else based on that.
Well, you got biographies. Like, what about an autobiography?
That would be definitely a primary source. Because, well, you have to think, biographies are usually written by somebody else. So like George Washington, someone writes a biography on that. It's not himself, but an autobiography would be a primary source. Okay. Any examples that is not in there that you would want to share with me? I know y'all are biting at it to just answer, give so many discussions.
I gotta think, hold on. What about like a documentary?
I said that.
Yeah, you did say documentary. Again, that would be, unless you're doing like a self-documentary, that would be like a primary example. You know, like vloggers, that would be primary resources. Documentaries like on the History Channel, those are secondary because it's based off something else. Yeah?
Yeah.
Okay. That sound good? Yes?
Sounds
Thumbs up?
good.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I'll take it. Okay, now we're going to go to a game.
Oh,
This one is actually pretty fun.
I love
Side
games.
quest. And hopefully everything works out. So this is Wheel of Sources game. It's basically where it's like a little game show, and as you're going to work together as the class, and I'm going to decide. You're going to tell me why you think what is what. Well, let's have at it. Let's start it.
get to it.
So just remember
Pretty
the
cook.
start icon at the end.
Welcome to Wheel of Sources, the game show about primary and secondary sources. I'm your host, Keon. You are about to meet a set of researchers who come from a variety of backgrounds and experience levels. Each researcher has a specific research
Oh no.
topic and specific sources that they are using in their paper. Your job is to figure out which sources are primary and which sources are
Are you
secondary.
doing full
But
screen?
remember, whether a source is primary or secondary depends on the context.
Helps so much,
So always
yeah.
think about the research topic before answering. Now before we begin, let's see some general definitions of primary and secondary sources. Over to you, Jen.
Thanks, Keon. In the humanities, primary sources generally provide a first-hand account of a research topic, while secondary sources interpret, summarize, or critique the original information. In the sciences, primary sources generally contain original research. Secondary sources summarize or analyze other primary research papers, but do not themselves contain original research. Now that you know the rules of the game, it's time to spin the Wheel of Sources.
Woo! Come on, excitement.
Yeah, I'm happy. Let's go. We win these. I'm cooking right here. That's Elvis Presley.
This is Roy,
Oh,
an
that's Roy.
undergraduate history major writing a research paper for a class assignment. His research topic is Martin Luther King Jr. and the Civil Rights Movement. His sources include an interview with Martin Luther King Jr. and a recent book about the Civil Rights Movement. Which source is primary and which is secondary?
Got it.
Okay, raise your hand and tell me which is which.
The interview is primary, and the recent book is secondary.
Yep, I agree with him.
Yeah.
I agree with him. He's
Yeah.
right.
Okay, why do we agree?
His IQ's high.
It's recent book, and the other one's an actual interview.
Okay, true. So again,
I
good.
Y'all are 10th graders. Y'all think
Actually,
Actually,
she's in 11th grade.
nonetheless, y'all are
I'm
studying.
a 17-year-old.
So,
Okay.
again, we're saying that the interview with Martin Luther King will be a primary source because it is a first-hand account that Martin Luther King. And this guy is, again, doing his research in this, so that would be a primary source. And then secondary is a recent book about the Civil Rights Movement, which is probably has this in it, but is not the base for it. So,
Yeah,
let's see if we got it.
I like the way you think. This is correct. Yep. Give me some.
The interview with Martin
We're
Luther
dying
King
to do
Jr.
over
is
here,
a
LeBron
primary
Kobe.
source because it is a first-hand account of his life. It also belongs to the time period that Roy is researching. The book about the Civil Rights Movement is a secondary source because it contains a second-hand account of the Civil Rights Movement. It likely contains many citations of first-hand accounts of the Civil Rights Movement, like interviews, photographs, and newspaper articles from that time period.
Watch my car mix.
Oh, I think I know.
Jen.
This is Sonia, an astrophysics graduate student writing a master's thesis. Her research topic is the evolution of starburst
I got this
galaxies. Her sources include a review article on galaxy evolution and an empirical study on galaxy evolution.
Do you remember what
Her
empirical
source
was?
is primary
Star
and which
Wars
is
is the
secondary.
galaxy. Empire.
Okay, so
Know this one.
anyone over here wants to try?
I got
Not
it.
that I know that my guy's on this corner, but come on, guys, somebody over here, give me a.
Hey, you got it, Brandon.
The empirical study
Is
would
what?
be secondary to there was a study.
Empirical is often primary.
Brother, I don't like the way
Remember
you're
that.
talking.
And then meta-analysis are secondary because meta-analysis is, that was a hard thing to say, on it. Take information and they basically do statistics with it, kind of work off others, whereas the empirical basically means like first hand. I'm pretty sure that's what that means. So, we
Empirical's
wanna go,
primary.
what do we think is primary?
Alright, empirical,
empirical
because
study.
it's just a review article.
Okay, so review would be secondary, right?
Yeah, you're
Because
reviewing it. That means it's already existed before.
Oh yeah, we're 2 for 2.
Okay, we got it.
Like, what do you
The
say?
I feel
empirical
horrible
study is
if
a
I said the
primary
wrong
source
thing and
because
I
it represents
You put
original
Cozy and LeBron in the
research.
same room?
The literature review is a secondary source because it summarizes and reinterprets information found in empirical studies.
Oh, I bet this one's gonna be Jim. Nope, just kidding. This is Jim. This is
This
Leanne.
is Leanne, an undergraduate English student working on a research paper to present at Undergraduate Research Week.
Who win this?
Her research topic is 19th century English poetry. Her sources include an English poem from 1850 and an academic journal article on English poetry. Which source is primary and which is
I
secondary?
believe Michael's got it.
Why, what is the answer?
I believe an English poem from 1850 would be the primary because it's from 1850, meaning the person wrote it in 1850.
Alright, sounds good. And then why would an academic journal article be secondary?
Because it's an article. It's
It
really
could be
hard.
wrote in a later
So
date.
smart.
Alright, that is true, it is a later date. And usually you're probably you're analyzing a poem like this, so that would be a secondary source.
So how high is your IQ? I mean,
Let's finish this before we start talking about IQs. Alright.
this is damn.
Since
Albert
Leanne's
Einstein.
research in literature, the text that is central to her work is primary, and everything that's written about that text is secondary. That means that the poem is primary and the journal article is secondary because it is about the poem.
Oh, we're getting done.
Who's gonna be this one? Piece of paper.
This is a concert review of a performance of The Rite of Spring,
Great
a
play.
piece of music written by Igor Stravinsky.
Oh, the song.
Evelyn, a professor
Evelyn.
and music historian, is researching the history of concert reviews. Mateo, an undergraduate musicology major, is researching The Rite of Spring. Which researcher would treat the source as primary and which would treat it as secondary?
No,
Okay, so
my query.
what we're using, our source is the concert review of The Rite of Spring. And then we have Evelyn here, whose research topic is the history of concert reviews. And then we have Mateo, who is, the research topic is The Rite of Spring itself.
Potato.
So, who would use this article as a primary source?
Potato.
Would Mateo use it as the primary source?
Yes.
Why would it be the other one?
Oh, review. I didn't. My bad.
Alright, so again, for someone who is doing The Rite of Spring itself, we would want not probably to use this because this is a secondary source as a
I didn't
primary
see
source
it.
for him. Meanwhile, for her, who her whole thing is concert reviews, she would use this probably as a primary source. So let's see if this works.
I didn't see the review part.
I said Evelyn. I'm the only one.
Who kn- I could get it wrong, who knows?
Oh, I think you're right, though.
Let's go.
Evelyn would treat this concert review as a primary source because the central topic of her research is concert reviews. Mateo would treat this source as secondary because it is an interpretation of the Rite of Spring, which is his primary source. This is an episode from a documentary TV series about the Great Depression. Sierra, an undergraduate history student, is researching labor during the Great Depression. Reza, a PhD candidate in history, is researching media portrayals of poverty. Which researcher would treat this source as primary, and which would treat it as secondary?
So,
Reza's primary
why?
because he's talking about media, TV's media.
I
Okay.
like it. I like it.
Anyone else got any opinions?
No, I agree.
Oh, we got an agreement. Okay. So, Reza for primary,
Yep.
Sierra for secondary.
She could watch a documentary about labor.
Well, again, so her whole thing, her research topic is labor during the Great Depression. So, a TV series about the Great Depression, that doesn't sound very primary because obviously that is a more modern thing, whereas the Great Depression happened in the 1930s, right? Is that correct?
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure that happened.
1929.
So that's
And then obviously Reza's, where he's doing media portrayals, would use this as a primary source because it's a TV show. So let's see if that got that right. All right.
Oh my God.
Sierra would treat this source as secondary because it is a second-hand account of the
I
Great
got it. Don't
Depression.
worry, guys.
A primary source for Sierra would be an artifact from the Great Depression, such as an audio recording of a speech given by the president. Reza would treat this source as primary because it is an example of the media portraying poverty. An example of a secondary source for Reza would be a social media post about the TV series.
We got 3 more to go.
Marina is an undergraduate biology student working in a faculty-led lab. Her research topic involves stem cells. Here are some types of sources that she might use in her paper: a meta-analysis, an empirical study, experimental data, and a review article.
Okay. We covered these
Which of
before,
these sources
guys.
are primary and which are secondary?
Oh,
Okay. So, yes.
Do you want me to give one or just
You give
two?
me one.
Okay. Experimental would be primary
Okay.
oh my God, he's so smart.
Why?
because you're experimenting with something right then.
Okay. Who wants to give me another one?
Okay, that was one I was gonna say.
Empirical, because it's primary, because it's the primary.
Attaboy. Attaboy. Okay, so what about a meta-analysis? Do we remember what that was?
Taking multiple pieces of data and putting them into one study, so it's secondary.
Good job. And then we have a review article. Where do we think that goes?
It's reviewing it, so it'd be secondary.
Secondary.
Okay, let's see if that's it. We got it. Yippee!
The
Yippee.
empirical study and experimental data are primary because they both involve original research. The review article and meta-analysis are secondary because they summarize and reinterpret primary scientific literature.
That's you, my boy.
Avery is a PhD candidate in cultural anthropology writing a dissertation. His research
Have a good day,
topic is
boys.
the Alaskan Inuit. Here are some types of sources that he might use in his paper: a diary, a photograph, demographic data, and an academic journal article. Which of these sources are primary and which are secondary?
Okay,
I got a
guys.
secondary one.
All right, give me which one for secondary?
I'm leaving. I got baseball game.
Oh.
The journal, the academic journal article.
Okay, secondary. Okay, give me a primary.
Diary.
A diary. Yes, diaries are a good example of primaries because they're written by an individual. What about the other two?
A photograph would be primary too.
You're right.
It was there.
And then demographic data.
That's secondary.
Is it?
No, it's
Yeah.
primary. It's data. It's real.
Because you have to be there to get the demographic of what's going on.
No, you can see demographics through your phone, like.
Demographic. Let's try it. So we think it's primary.
Yeah, I think it's primary.
Okay.
Told you.
Let's go.
The The diary, photograph, and demographic data are all primary sources because they all provide first-hand accounts of life as an Alaskan Inuit. The academic journal article is a secondary source because it uses those first-hand accounts to summarize and discuss life as an Alaskan Inuit through an interpretive, scholarly lens.
We're doing.
We're almost done. We've done really
Now
well.
it's your turn to be a researcher. Take out a sheet of paper
Actually, pretty
or
much
a
that.
blank
It's already
document,
it.
brainstorm ideas.
Because the other two are just like stuff that you actually submit. But we did really good. I'm very impressed with you guys.
Thank you. I'm impressed with you too.
Oh, that's the
Remember,
nicest
yeah.
thing you've ever said to me. I suppose. Okay. I have so many of these open. Okay. So, what do we think about that? Do you think that was like a good way to kind of reiterate what I said?
Yeah.
Yes.
Alrighty. Thank you. So, discussion. Can any of you guys think of some examples of primary research that you have done in school?
Photographs.
An essay?
Well, was it like an essay that was like your opinion and stuff, or did you
Yeah.
have to like look up information for
An
it?
opinion, like an essay.
So that would be an example of your own primary resource, I would think.
A
Maybe.
personal essay.
Well, personal. I'm thinking about like, have you ever had to do like a research paper?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. What was that paper on?
Martin Luther King.
So, what did you use from that may be a primary or secondary resource?
Google.
But what did you find on Google? Wikipedia
The
is
history-
not a valid
the History Channel?
resource.
History Channel secondary though. Remember?
But it was a biography.
So you use that biography from the History Channel on your paper?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Anybody else?
It wasn't a video, it was an article.
Oh, okay. See, there we go. Better. I was thinking like you went to like the actual History Channel.
No,
What was it?
no.
Word by word. right?
History.com.
There we go. Anybody else? So you're telling me none of y'all have done research papers before?
I had to do one on
I have.
I just gave one a while back.
Okay. What was it?
Jeffrey Epstein.
I did it through like 3 different sources. I did it through like the actual White House
Okay,
website,
good.
and then a few others.
And which one of those would be examples of a primary source, you think?
Primary source, definitely the White House documents.
Okay, very good. Another example is like, I know many of you have probably done a book report before, right?
Yeah.
So again, you've never done a book report? Well, I think you're probably gonna have to do one maybe.
Hey, Dave.
Uh,
We're good.
But anywho, so like if you're doing a book report, the primary resource, like I said, would be like Fahrenheit 451, if you're doing your book report on that. Anything else? Anybody have any or ideas or share what they maybe have used as a secondary or primary resource in school?
Secondary newspaper.
Is it? Why?
Because it's somebody else's word.
But even if a school
About
releases
the
a
topic.
newspaper, it's still a primary thing.
Yeah, I didn't say it was a school.
No,
newspaper.
it would be a secondary source.
Well, he
because-
said school.
Well, I mean, who knows?
He said-
I don't know what he's doing in that class.
It isn't what I'm doing.
But it is a good secondary. So, after what we've learned, this is your rubric. If you go online to your materials, you can also see that rubric so you'll know how to grade. There's 10 questions. It's really easy, and this will basically end our lesson for today. I'll hand that out.
Great lesson. Great lesson.
Oh, I appreciate it, bud. It's really simple. It's multiple choice. You get to have a little prompt, and you decide if it's a primary or a secondary article. And you will have till the end of class, but hopefully you all will be able to get done with it pretty quick.
Michael. Give me a pencil.
Looking at bossing you around.
Huh? You said can. You said can you?
I felt like it was kind of demanding.
That's right. You get one with no eraser. Better not make no mistake.
I don't get my questions wrong.
Be nice, boys.
This one's right
Third.
Give it a shot.
Stop flexing.
Alright, one. Huh?
It doesn't have to have an eraser.
Hey, Hayden, catch us up.
I don't have it. What do you think you can? All right.
Yeah, I thought it was.
Yeah.
There are pencils on the table.
And remember, guys, if you have any questions, feel free to ask me. But I really think you all should be able to do this pretty well.
I feel like I should.
Does anybody not have one?
No, sir.
All right, good deal. I even like went online and found little pictures and put it on there to make it interactive
Dude,
and
I'm
fun.
impressed here. I'm impressed.
It ain't going out.
Alright, I'm done.
Did you get them all?
I probably ain't alright. But
I'll give us till like 2:15, and then I'll pick them up if everyone has
I
everything.
just like there's too many primaries on here.
This case. Say, buddy. You can ask me too. But no, which one is it?
Alright.
An encyclopedia. So remember, that is like, what is an encyclopedia? So you find a whole bunch of information about stuff, right? Yes. Yes, sir. Well, what had happened was I used this staple that
I'm done.
Written by a historian.
But it should hold up together. Sometimes you have to like working with different weights.
This nice?
No, he's like,
Yeah.
It was like a,
what's your grade?
85.
Is it gonna go up?
yeah, I have it on, but you didn't have it.
You made your 30 classes.
You want another one? I know.
Megan Miller is an op.
It's quick and easy.
Drink, sir?
How's it going, girls?
Oh, cool.
Recording.
No, don't ask a question.
Oh, what? You can holler at me.
I don't know your name.
Mr. McConnell or Mr. Colton, whatever you want to do. I'm supposed to grade this technically. That's why you got that wee little rubric.
This is primary. Day after Moonlight.
I think you're in probably very good shape.
I know.
Yeah.
It was published right after.
The glazing's great.
There's nothing third.
Green, yeah, green and
No, I'm not running.
Why do you carry me down?
You're out of your prime.
Is there anybody that's still working
You're
on
never
it?
more in your prime.
Anybody still working on it? Okay, so if you are done with that, you can go ahead and put your Chromebooks up and put that over on the table, what we did yesterday. We are done. Well, unless Miss Casey has something for y'all to do.
No, she'll go out. Is the video still on?
Alrighty. Yes, the video is still going.
Oh.
So please refrain from cussing.
I did cuss.
But then also just remember that both primary and secondary sources are valuable. Basically, everything has its own purpose. So, the world is your oyster.